Hey there, hope you're all having a good night. Wanted to shoot a little video before I get ready for bed and the last day of work this week. So I been holding off on looking at the Wainwright Prizes. It's one of the book prizes I would like to follow, and they just announced their long list this week. So if you're not familiar with them, I've only followed them last year or two maybe. They're a prize out of the UK that's focused on nature and conservation writing, and they also have a big selection that they call the Children's Wainwright Prize, where they have several categories of like children's literature. And so right now I'm more interested in the nonfiction writing. I may look at the children's one because I do have an infant, and it could be a great source of inspiration to collect some books for him. But just for tonight, since it says there's almost 70 books altogether, I'm just gonna focus on the nonfiction. And so with that, there's two categories. There is nature writing, and there's conservation writing. And so I've got them all pulled up. I just want to kind of go over each, and I'll pop the little covers up over here as we talk about them. And I'll kind of highlight any that I'm especially interested in reading. So I guess let's get to it. So we'll start with the nature writing. Looks like they've got 14 books on that list. And so let's get this a little closer. Okay. The first one is called Being an Oak by Laurent Tillon. For over 2 centuries, as rulers have risen and fallen and wars have raged, one majestic oak tree has lived out an epic drama. From germination in 1780 to adapting to the changing climate of the modern age, its struggles and triumphs took place far from human eyes. That is until one day, a young man named Laurent Tillon, that's the author, came across it, and a decades-long relationship began. So in this book, he narrates the story of the tree he calls Quercus. Evoking the richness which is all around us, he reveals that Quercus is embedded in a network of ever-shifting relationships, from close alliances between plants and animals to battles between insects, birds, and fungi. So it says, offers a tree-eyed view of life on Earth. So that one is catching my eye. I think it's a pretty evocative description of it. I mentioned before, there's a few different themes I want to look into each month. And I'm trying not to get overexcited and plan them out too far in advance and get burnt out. But I do want to do one on trees and like tree life and tree intelligence, I guess, so many words. And also one on like big spans of time, like deep time kind of themes. And so this one I would love to do in the month when I want to focus on trees and how we're connected with them. There's a novel I've wanted to try to read. Sounds like it's kind of a beast, but The Overstory, and it's making me think of that. So that could be a really fun month. So that will probably end up on my short list of ones I want to try to read. The next one is called Love is a Toad by Lucy Lapwing. It says, nature makes us feel things. It sparks awe, curiosity, and a sense of beauty and community. But as wildlife around us declines and disappears, murkier feelings rise up. Guilt, detachment, and fear for nature's plight. For many years, Lucy Lapwing wrestled with these tangled emotions. So in an attempt to make sense of this dance between joy and grief, she decided to go on a journey. It says she goes to meadows, bogs, and hedgerows with fellow nature enthusiasts and digs down into our relationship with the natural world. So over a year. So she meets blackbird and oak, slugs and puffballs, water lilies, dung beetles, and toads across the UK. So it's kind of her memoir of that year. And so that sounds like it could be a fun one. I've noticed quite a few of these, understandably, are focused on the UK as its own natural world, which I've enjoyed. I have read quite a few books, especially birding books, because birding is a big thing in the UK. And so this one's not as interesting for me quite yet. Hold on, just a second. Okay. I don't know if it was really loud on there, but it was really loud right here. So we'll see. We'll see. It does sound interesting though. The next one is called The Whispers of Rock by Anjana Khatwa. And so this one says it's a poetic and heartfelt journey through deep time. And so she says, from the sacred stones of Stonehenge to the rose-red city of Petra, from towering mountains to the smallest grains of sand, rocks have had profound influence on human life. She's an earth scientist and TV presenter, and she switches between modern science and ancient lore to go on an exhilarating journey through deep time, from bursting volcanoes in the Andes to the wonders of the Dorset coastline, while honoring indigenous stories that have brought the land alive over the millennia. She also explores connect with Earth as guided her through the toughest times and offers hope and reconnection with Earth and its stories. So that one also, I had mentioned already before, I want to do one on deep time, and a lot of it seems to jump through like geology kind of themes, and so I'm really interested in that one. That could be a really fun month also. And I'm blanking on the other books I had thought about for that, but I have a little list of other titles I was thinking about to fit in with that time. I think I was thinking about trying Land by Maggie O'Farrell. I do want to read that because I really enjoyed Hamnet. And Land seems like it could fall into that, where the story of the land itself and its time, pretty big time jumps, it sounds like that happens in that book, could mesh well with this. I think this is talking about even bigger jumps in time, perhaps. So yeah, I'm interested in that one. Next one is Stonelands. It says a journey of darkness and light through Britain's ancient places. So again, another one's really focused on Britain. And so it talks about their incredible prehistoric standing stones. And it sounds like it's a memoir. She said a few months after discovering her beloved husband Stephen had incurable cancer, Fiona Robertson began to write this book. She is a megalith enthusiast. And so she kind of used it to cope with that anticipatory grief with her husband. She says megaliths are symbols of endurance and survival, standing in contrast to our ephemeral human lives. And so it kind of goes into the folklore and legend and mystery of these different megaliths. And so that one sounds really interesting. I do like grief memoirs. I work a lot in grief counseling. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet, but I work in hospice care. And so we do bereavement counseling. And so I'm around that quite a bit. And I enjoy it, and I enjoy reading about it. I've also had a pretty big loss this year too, and so I may have to look at that some more. It could be good down the road, but I don't know if I'm ready for a big grief memoir, just for my own feelings. So, but I am going to put them on my list of ideas for like grief memoirs. I do enjoy those at the right time. So next up is The Genius of Trees, which says also it was longlisted for the Women's Prize in their nonfiction category this year. So this one says, over hundreds of millions of years, from prehistoric forests to those standing tall over us today, trees have evolved to sculpt the environments. They split rocks, change sex, spin carbon, and manipulate bacteria, animals, and even humankind to achieve their ends and shape the natural world. And so she kind of goes across the world talking about trees as their own agents of change in their ecosystems, which also sounds like right up for that tree month. Tree month is coming soon. I don't think it'll be next month, but it is coming, because that's one I'm really excited about. All right. Then we've got Grasslands, The Intricate Life of Britain's Hidden Habitats by John Wright. And so he talks about the beauty and rich diversity of Britain's grasslands, bursting with mushrooms, lichen, and wildflowers, home to butterflies, bees, and beetles, and vital to foxes and birds alike. These grasslands are part of our natural heritage. And so that could be fun too. Again, it's very focused on Britain. If I did like a Britain Nature Month, or as a natural world of Britain, I would look at that one for sure. But I'm not so interested in ones that are like about specific places so much right now. So after that, there is The Waterlands by Stephen Rutt. So it's a new story of water, revealing its natural rhythms and miraculous power. Follow a raindrop as it flows through diverse waterscapes, river sources in the upland moors, salt marsh flanked firths and estuaries, serene and spectacular lochs, crystal clear chalk streams, blanket bogs that are both land and liquid, thin skin of peat over millennia old water. It's a pretty sentence, and I'm surprised I didn't trip up more. So he writes about how water shapes the land, our lives, and how we shape it in return. It includes geography, ecology, climate writing, and social history as a captivating retelling of the water cycle, an urgent call to protect our most essential resource. That could be interesting. That's one of those nature phenomena that we learned in, like elementary school, the water cycle. And so it would be fun to have this book and then see what other literature I could find that plays on, the metaphors that can come from that. Okay, next one is a bird book. I'm partial to those, so I'm excited. It's called An Inconvenience of Penguins by Jamie Lafferty. From kings and emperors to macaronis and rockhoppers, penguins are one of the most immediately recognizable animals on Earth. He visits all 18 species of penguins in the world to understand the birds and their extraordinarily varied habitats a little better, and including voyages to some of the most inaccessible landscapes in the world. Getting stranded in the Galapagos and marching through African guano fields to leading photography groups in the Antarctic and taking psychedelics on the Falklands. Okay. It's a birding quest like no other. So he also relives experiences of early polar explorers for whom penguins were perplexing mysteries, welcome companions, and even occasional meals, and meets the modern penguin lovers trying to save their fragile environments. And so that would be fun. So that might be a fun wintertime one. I'll just do a whole penguin month. Y'all could put up with a whole penguin month, right? If I can find 8 books that involve penguins, I'm sure that's doable. So I'm only half joking. There's a very strong possibility I may do that. All right. After that, it's another bird mentioned in the title, the cuckoo's lair. Hidden in the names of English towns and villages and copses, fields, lanes, and hills are ghostly traces of birds conjuring powerful identities for people in ancient landscapes. So he tries to set up the trail of these ghostly traces of birds. Captivated and guided by the secrets of place names, he finds their stories entangled with his own exploration of places through birds across all England. The past is hauntingly and movingly present in timeless marshes, where curlews cry, where goshawks are breeding again for the first time in centuries. And so, yeah, that one talks more about kind of, looks like place names and kind of the history of birds and like their cultural role in England. And so I would probably read that one, even though it's more Britain focused, but the birds win me over. Okay, we've got a few more in the nature writing category. So next one is Craftland by James Fox. And so this one talks about great craftspeople in England. So he goes, visits with blacksmiths and wheelwrights, cutlers and coopers, bell founders and watchmakers. We glimpse not only our past, but another way of life, one is not yet lost and might still shape our future. And so that's interesting. It's kind of sounds like a merge between a couple of different things. It's not jumping out to me as much, but for some people, they may really like that. Next is also more England focused again. It's called Ancient, Reviving the Woods That Made Britain. And so it talks about, mostly it says remnants of the primeval wildwood and how they need intervention, rehabilitation to survive in England. He's got 20 years of experience rehabilitating ancient woodland from the lakes to the Peak District by way of suburban London's hidden gems. And so he talks about how we need to rekindle our ancient connection with those places and different ways that they can be kind of revived and, restored. So that one could be good too. This one also jumped out at me. I think the cover of it's pretty cool. It's called My Body is a Meadow, Finding Freedom in the Outdoors by Bethany Handley. So it says, since childhood, Bethany Handley has always felt most at home out in the wilds of the Welsh countryside. It's all changed when Bethany becomes a full-time wheelchair user in her 20s and suddenly found herself padlocked out of all the landscapes she belonged to. So today, nearly 1 in 4 people are disabled in the UK, but public rights of way are blocked in 32,000 places across England and Wales. My Body is a meadow writes into this troubling landscape, delivering a galvanizing call for us to rethink how we live among nature and each other. So she explores ableism, climate justice, and what nature means to her. That one would be interesting. I have a long-standing interest in like disability studies and disability rights, especially when I was in college. And so when I see books like that, I'm like, man, I would have really enjoyed that one of my classes then. And so that is a topic I want to explore more. And so I think this one might be in my top few for this category also. This one is called Ghosts of the Farm, 2 Women's Journeys Through Time, Land, and Community by Nicola Chester. So it talks about a woman named Miss White who lived in the author's village 80 years ago, who realized her ambition to become a farmer during the Second World War, and how she worked to become accepted within that community. And as she wonders, was it easier for women to become farmers in the 1940s compared to now? And it kind of says, draws parallels between their two lives, which is a really interesting idea. I like that. That one sounds interesting. I may look into that one more too. Alright, last one on here is Wild Pavements. Again, it's more focused on England. It's focused on urban environments across the UK. Explore the diversity of urban nature in all surprising places you can find it, from wild bees living on a canal bank and black redstarts, nesting in London's Oxford Street, to rare plants and pavement cracks, and new fish life in trolley-filled urban rivers. Her stories are out there for anyone to enjoy. So, that one could be fun. There's a few books I've read like that. There was one I liked that was, it was like The Secret Life of Public Birds. I think that was more urban focused. And then there was one just about pigeons, too. So those are all the nature writing books. So I think out of those, I'll kind of pop them up through here. The ones I'm most interested in are Being an Oak. Really like that one. The Whispers of Rock. That was the deep time focused one. The Genius of Trees. Also would really like to read that one. And Inconvenience of Penguins. And, The Waterlands. I do want to read The Waterlands sometime too. And My Body is a Meadow. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, if I had to pick half, one more, I would pick Ghosts of the Farm. So that would be, if I had to read half of these, those are the ones I would be more drawn to reading. So that's the nature writing category. So next up, I've got the conservation writing. So again, there's another 14 books in here. So just bear with me. The first one is called When the Forest Breathes, Renewal and Resilience in the Natural World by Suzanne Simard. So she is a forest ecologist, and she discusses how the deep-rooted cycles of renewal sustain the forest can also help us protect our entire global ecosystem. She was raised in a family of loggers committed to sustainable stewardship, and she has watched as timber companies leave the forests of her native British Columbia vulnerable to wildfires and drought, threatening the crucial biodiversity they support. And so her research for the Mother Tree Project, which is one of the most ambitious forest ecology experiments of its kind, has the potential to start a new course. She says the forest is a living symphony of finely honed cycles of birth, growth, death, and rebirth that hold the key to protecting the natural world. And she works with indigenous communities to explain how this style of forestry can preserve the cycles of the forest that can help solve the global climate crisis. So that sounds like a really, really good book. Alright, next one, if I don't scroll wrong, is called The Savage Landscape, How We Made the Wilderness by Cal Flynn. So it hops around some different places, Iceland, the Amazon jungle, Antarctica. So it kind of deconstructs the idea of like these truly wild places, revealing that there's really no corner of the earth that hasn't been touched by humans to some extent now, and just how that myth of wild places is constructed in our cultures. So that sounds pretty cool. Next one is called Every Last Fish, What Fish Do for Us and What We Do to Them. It talks about the vast legal industry to support our appetite for fish fingers and salmon sandwiches, and the equally colossal illegal fishing trade whose practices and standards are unmonitored and often dangerous. Talks about people who work in these communities from Alaska to Senegal, Scotland, Norway, Massachusetts, all the way from fishing nets to on the surface to the murky depths of the seabed. So it'll transform the way you look at fish and change your understanding of what lies behind the inscrutable eye that looks back at you. So, I don't eat fish, but I will still probably read this at some point. This kind of hops around with different spots, including Watchet Harbour in Southwest to Gateshead, Lancashire, London. Talking about people who shape their own destinies with first-hand knowledge of the problems Britain faces and clear ideas of how to make things better. About regeneration, reclaiming power, and the hope that comes from community action. And so that sounds like a good, environmental activist book that's focused specifically on issues England's facing. Next one is by Rebecca Solnit, who I've heard of. I haven't read her work, but I've heard her name. It's called The Beginning Comes After the End. And so it says, in recognizing the interdependent and symbiotic relationships in nature and among humans, this revolution is beginning to overturn capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and the human domination of nature, despite the best efforts of the old world to fight back. From one of the most significant thinkers of our day, This book is a culmination of years of activism and offers a unique perspective on our politics and our humanity to give hope in difficult times and urgently remind us of the power to change the world within our reach. I will definitely look into that one because I've seen her name come up in some other list also. Been interested. Next one is called Green Crime: Inside the Minds of the People Destroying the Planet and How to Stop Them by Julia Shaw. And so she is a criminal psychologist, and she writes about some of the worst environmental crimes of our time. She reconstructs the minds of the perpetrators in cases like Deepwater Horizon, oil spill, Dieselgate emission scandal, and the Shuidong Wildlife Crime Syndicate, going from Amazon forest to South African gold mines, follows the impact of green crimes to our doorsteps, and profiles the work of the heroes bringing these criminals to justice. So that one kind of sounds interesting. It's not, I guess I'm more of the dreamy, poetic kind of reader, so it doesn't jump out at me as much, but the topics in it do sound interesting. Speaking of that one, this one looks very kind of more poetic and abstract. It's called Snow, A History by, I probably won't say it right, Sverker Sorlin. It's a Norwegian, I believe. Even the description is a lot more poetic. It says, snow, a single word for an infinite variety of water formulations frozen in air. The study of snow is physics, chemistry, meteorology, anthropology, geography, poetry, and art. It is hope annually renewed, and it is history, too. Kind of talks about, the concerns that with climate change, we're losing that part of our natural world of snow. And so this is more of a study on that and a love letter to snow. Then there is Neurodivergent by Nature. This is Why Biodiversity Needs Neurodiversity. That's interesting, by Joe Harkness. And so it asks, why are so many neurodivergent people drawn to the natural world, and what does that tell us about how we live and work? So he explores the skills, perspectives, and passions that neurodivergent people bring to the sector, alongside the barriers they still face. From field work to policy, from grassroots project to major organizations, their stories reveal how different ways of thinking shape our relationship with the natural world. So that one sounds fun. I like that. Next one is called Drifting North by Dominique Hind. I'm not sure. Finding a Sustainable Future in Scotland's Past. Part memoir, part environmental history, part travelogue. It's a compelling narrative of connections to place, energy, and the possibility of renewal through the lens of one country. It asks a vital question: can the lessons of the past help us build a more sustainable future? I had a phase, I think a lot of people do, of like Irish lit, but I hadn't really done with Scottish lit, but now more recently I've been noticing books I've been drawn to are set or written by authors from Scotland or set in Scotland. So that might be one to consider. This one also is more UK again, understandably. It's called The Wilder Lands, The Human History of Wild Britain by Eloise Kane. So she unearths 12,000 years of our relationship with and influence on the landscape. That's another relatively deep time one. Through prehistory, Roman occupation, Middle Ages, and beyond, we see the unfamiliar beasts of our old wild make way for species such as brown hare and fallow deer, now romanticized the eternal symbols of the British countryside, but introduced much later than we might think. And so that one sounds kind of fun. Again, especially if you're interested in Britain in particular. Next one is called Eat the Planet Well: How to Fix Our Toxic Food System One Meal at a Time by Dave Goulson. So it talks about the way we produce food today is damaging people and nature alike. Modern, intensive farming systems producing pesticide-laced, ultra-processed foods are bad for us and for the planet. There's cause for hope, from supporting more sustainable farming systems and modifying what we eat, to wasting less and growing more ourselves. Dave Goulson shows that change is possible and individual choices do matter, even when governments fail to act. And it has surprising insights and practical guidance. I may read that one. Alright, we got a few more in the conservation writing. So this one is called How to Fall in Love with the Future, a time traveler's guide to changing the world by Rob Hopkins. And so it talks about in 2020, which, you remember probably what the deal with 2020 was. He coped by starting a podcast. Where he and his guests would time travel to the year 2030, walking down imagined future streets, talking with future neighbors, visiting imagined future local businesses. And while his guests came from all walks of life, they all shared a willingness to spend their worries about the future long enough to mentally inhabit and then describe a world they were thrilled to be a part of. From the life and writings of the musician Sun Ra and the history of Black utopian movements to the latest neuroscience on what goes on in our minds and hearts when we time travel, it brings essential new thinking to anyone overwhelmed with that climate anxiety, that dread. Yes, let's consider what would the world look like if we all got to work imagining and then building a world we are deeply in love with. And so that sounds like that would work really great, or in tandem with that The Beginning Comes After the End by Rebecca Solnit. So I may have to do one that's just like a climate anxiety therapy month. So if I do that, maybe to ring in the new year or something, those are 2 great books for that. A couple more. This one is Plastic Ink by Beth Gardner. That's probably going to be more of a climate horror one. Plastic is everywhere in our daily lives, but the companies making it, oil and petrochemical giants like ExxonMobil and INEOS, are hiding in plain sight. There's not much discussion where plastic actually comes from. Yeah, it's very true. It talks about that industry flooding our world and now prepared to make more than ever. Gets us a look at the plastics industry's relentless growth, extraordinary profits, toxic pollution, and hidden role in exacerbated climate change. Oh yes, it sounds like a climate horror book. Also, I think an important book to read. Even though it does give me that dread. Okay, last one is, and it's funny because I've actually have seen this title because I was thinking about reading this next month before this long list even come out. This one is called The Return of the Oyster Catcher by Scott Weidensaul. Across the world, scientists, conservationists, and ordinary people are involved in groundbreaking work to restore billions of lost birds. And together they're tackling the hollowing out of springtime dawn chorus and the withering away of once great migration multitudes. It's about the uplifting story of the success of helping, replenish the population of birds and what it means for us and our planet, because a world that works for birds and all their complexity of movement, ecological need, work for everyone else, including people. That one I was thinking about for next month, because I'm thinking of doing one that's talks about shorelines, basically, and books that not only take place on those, like, beach-based books or island books, but also the ones that play with shores as like a metaphor. And talk about that little transitional strip of land and water there, and how that plays across in nature, but also in writing too. And so this was one I was thinking of as like my bird book for that. Anyways, before I wrap this up, of the conservation writing, if I had to pick 7, I would do When the Forest Breathes, do The Beginning Comes After the End. I'm interested in snow, a history. I'd like to do that one. Neurodivergent by Nature. Also would like that. Let's see. Eat the Planet Well. How to Fall in Love with the Future. And then, I gotta pick. Plastic one sounds interesting, but I've already said I'm going to read The Return of the Oyster Catcher, so we'll do that one. So, those are the top half I would pick. That is it for at least these categories for the Wainwright Prize. Shortlist will be announced on August 5th for each category, and then the winner ceremony will be on September 17th. That's all I've got for today, and so I've got to get back to reading. Like I said, I'm having a lot more luck on audio, but I'm working through my books for July, and so we'll kind of catch back up as we get later in the month and see how that's going and what's coming ahead. Y'all have a good night. Thanks. Bye.